President Biden made a statement on 24th of April, and for the first time calling the 1915 events as Armenian genocide. How do you read the 1915 events? What is your insight on those events happened 100 years ago, sir?
Political statements don't have any endpoint to this issue because they have no legal standing. Both the European Court of Human Rights in 2015, a case called Prensic versus Switzerland, and remember the European Court as one of its members is Armenia, but not Turkey, made clear and echoing a earlier decision by the French Constitutional Council that legislative, administrative bodies have no jurisdiction, they have no legal authority to pronounce guilt or innocence on the crime of genocide. That can only be done by a court of law. And under the Genocide Convention, Article 9, if there's a dispute about whether events were genocide, they're to be adjudicated before the International Court of Justice in The Hague. Now that article went into effect 70 years ago in 1951. Yeah. Armenia has never, ever taken their claim to the International Court of Justice as prescribed by the Genocide Convention. Obviously, Turkey, like any other person, enjoys a presumption of innocence. And until there's a tribunal that decides one way or the other, the presumption of innocence prevails. Now, if I am to look at the events of 1915, with my knowledge of the Genocide Convention, it seems to me highly dubious that the killings, which on both sides were very, very terrible, constituted genocide for several reasons. First, there is a principle of universal law that acts which were not criminal at the time they committed cannot retroactively be made criminal. The whole concept of genocide wasn't even coined until 1943, many, many decades after 1915. So to retroactively apply them to events in 1915 runs against the grain of international law. But even assuming you don't have this ex post facto problem, during the evolution of the Genocide Convention, it was understood that a killing, a death because of a political motivation is not a genocide. Political standing was excluded by the clear vote when it came up for discussion by the participants in drafting the Genocide Convention and ratifying it, and voted it out. That is, when you have killings a result because there's a battle over secession, for instance, those are not killings that can be characterized as genocide because they're over political disputes, whether a particular group deserves independence or not. It's not all that different from the United States Civil War, when in 1861, Southern states wanted to secede. There was a very, very bloody civil war. Hundreds of thousands died. The killings were over a political view. One wanted independence. The Union said, no, you have no authority under our Constitution. The killings were not genocide. And if you look at what transpired in World War I, even taking the Armenian the Armenian Ottomans at their own word, it clearly was not genocide. The Armenian Ottomans, they revolted in 1915. They were citizens of the Ottoman Empire. They owed them a duty of loyalty and were seeking to revolt in order to obtain political independence from the Ottoman Empire. They wanted to secede, a political objective. The killings that ensued were not genocidal by definition. The Ottoman Armenians themselves at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919 boasted that they, in 1915, joined the the Entente powers as belligerents. Those were the words they used. This was by someone, Mr. Nubar, who was a general in the Ottoman army before he committed treason. They abandoned their loyalty to the Ottoman Empire, threw it in with Russia and France, which were then enemies of the Ottoman Empire, Turkey, and fought as belligerents. They died as belligerents, and those are not genocidal killings. Moreover, there is at least circumstantial evidence that substantiates that the killings were not genocidal. They were not killings of innocent victims who were defenseless. Again, at the Paris Peace Conference, the Armenian, Ottoman, at that time, the Ottoman Empire had crumbled, but the Armenian representatives stated quite clearly that Ottoman Turks died in the same proportion, millions, as the Ottoman Armenians. Compare that, for example, with the Holocaust. Jews at these extermination camps, 6 million died. Well, what about the Nazis, the perpetrators? Did they die in those proportionate numbers? They didn't die at all. And that's why a very, very renowned Princeton historian, the Middle East, Bernard Lewis, says it's preposterous to liken what happened to the Armenians in World War I to the Holocaust. Yeah. That's a view also echoed by former Nobel Peace Prize winner and Prime Minister of Israel, Shimon Peres. So when you look at all of the circumstances, the statistics, the Armenian Ottoman own statements, I believe there's no plausible case to argue in favor of genocide characterization of the tragedy of World War I. And I believe it's precisely for that reason that for 70 long years, Armenia has refused to take their accusation that Turkey is guilty of genocide to the International Court of Justice. As we speak today, that international court is open and Armenia could have its claim adjudicated. It doesn't want to because it fears it would lose.
There is a clear distinction, as you also mentioned, internal conflicts or some types of civil war and genocide, of course. Despite this fact, why do you think the United States, currently Biden administration, made a statement calling it a genocide?
Well, remember this. Politicians, they don't read history. They have ulterior political motives. Do you think that Joe Biden and his staff went and read through all of the staggering amount of archives and historical writings about this era? Of course not. The reason why they make decisions, they have ulterior political motives. Money, who gives them campaign contributions, whose helps gets the vote out. And unfortunately for Turkey, Armenian Americans are far better organized. They're far more wealthy than Turkish Americans. And so all this is a political statement. It has nothing to do with the law whatsoever. And that's why you get these things. And of course, they never end the controversy. You can't, because as the European Court of Human Rights has held and the French Constitutional Council, legislative executive bodies have no jurisdiction to adjudicate an allegation of a crime of genocide. So all it does is fester politically forever. And that's why Armenia keeps it in the political domain forever. They don't want it adjudicated. They fear they would lose. Politically, they're far more armed than Turkish Americans in the political arena, and they've won. So why risk a loss in actual court of law if by simple sheer politics you can create the falsehood as conventional wisdom? I'd like to point out also that the International Court of Justice has decided previous genocide accusations. There was an accusation brought by Croatia against Serbia in 2015, accusations brought by Bosnia-Herzegovina against Serbia-Montenegro, 2007, their adjudication. So it's not as though genocide allegations can't be litigated. They can, and they have been litigated, and the International Court of Justice had made judgments on this score. Why do the Armenians resist? Again, I come back. They think they would lose. And another reason that makes their case suspect is that of all the relevant powers in World War I, only Armenia has refused to open their archives. Turkey has opened its, France has done its, Germany, Russia, Great Britain, United States. Only Armenia has kept them secret. And that leads to a natural inference. What are you hiding? Why, if you believe you have such an overwhelming case, wouldn't you open your archives to everyone and expect, why, there must be all sorts of incriminating evidence against Turkey? But no, they still remain closed. Well, I certainly think it's unfair and unjust and not in accord with American values. But unfortunately, it's not simply Turkey here that's singled out. It's unfortunate that we have lost such respect in many ways for the law that we make pronouncements, again, before there's out a trial. Oh, there's genocide in Burma, there's genocide in China, there's genocide in Darfur or whatever. Well, listen, I mean, I'm not trying to defend genocide. It's a terrible crime of crime. But there's a presumption of innocence that's of universal standing that's existed for 4,000 years. If there's a problem, then you need to take it to a court. And the International Court of Justice, long-standing, it's there, available. It has shown itself in the cases revolving around the terrible wars after the breakup of Yugoslavia, capable of rendering decisions. It's very quite reckless and stigmatizing to throw around this charge of genocide, make it seem as though you're issuing a conclusion, and you don't even have a trial. And I also would say that, you know, what President Biden said is not universally, you know, shared throughout all of the United States. To be candid, most Americans really don't know what the issue is about whatsoever. We don't teach history very much in the United States, and because if we don't get an International Court of Justice ruling, this is going to fester politically, you know, forever. Could be another 50 years, you know. And of course, even statements by the president, they're not binding. I mean, if a future president come in and said, no, I don't believe what President Biden said, I believe something different. Then it go back the other way. Same with resolutions of Congress. One doesn't bind the next one, and they're not court judgments, so yeah, it's easy to reverse them.
But
most unfortunate. It may well have impact on Turkish-American relations. That's surely true. And I also believe that the fallout emboldens Armenian Americans to be more vicious, if you will, more bullying, more intimidating, more threatening to Turkish Americans, saying, well, even now the president knows that, you know, you're denying genocide makes you complicit in the crime, and you're really a hateful people and all those sorts of things. And the fallout is very devastating.